Out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is one of the few medical emergencies that by the time the patient actually gets to the emergency department, the outcome is largely decided.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's decided is that the public is really the first link in the chain of survival for someone who suffers an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest.
She is a digital marketing specialist who can spin the meanest website around.
And he's host of the TV show Buzz, which features nonprofit organizations receiving marketing makeovers.
Here on Buzz for Good, we talk all things nonprofit, the people they serve and the good they do.
And we talk to creative professionals and provide marketing tips and tools to help your nonprofit achieve more.
That's right.
Buzz!
Well, greetings, everybody, and welcome to Buzz for Good, where we share the great work that nonprofit organizations do in Virginia. Well, today's show, we are featuring a nonprofit whose services I hope you never have to actually use. But in the unfortunate event that you do, that you have these tools and skills provided by this nonprofit to potentially save a life. But before we get to my conversation with the Compress and Shock Foundation, I invite everyone to stay connected to us by our website, buzzforgood.com. That's buzz, B-U-Z-Z, 4good.com. And on there, you can watch previous episodes of our TV show Buzz that airs every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. on Blue Ridge PBS, as well as listen to previous episodes of this podcast. Our next new episode of Buzz airs Wednesday, October the 19th, starring the West End Center for Youth and the pro bono marketing makeover that they received from a longtime Buzz friend, 5 Points Creative. The show will also air on our YouTube channel, and you can download it at any time on demand at Buzz for Good. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and that's right, TikTok at Buzz for Good. I want to thank our sponsors, Freedom First Credit Union, where people bank for good. That's freedomfirst.com. As well as the Roanoke Cultural Endowment, which is working to provide a long-term funding solution for Roanoke's arts and cultural organizations, as well as Partners in Financial Planning, a Southwest Virginia-based financial management firm, partnersinfinancialplanning.com. And now, my conversation with Dr. Karen Perkins, the Vice Director of the Compress and Shock Foundation. Well, it is my pleasure to welcome to Buzz for Good Karen Perkins, who is the Vice Director of the Compress and Shock Foundation. Karen, welcome to Buzz for Good.
Michael, thank you for having us. I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, let's start off with what is the Compress and Shock Foundation?
So the Compress and Shock Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit. We were founded in Roanoke, Virginia in 2017. And our mission is to bring free CPR and AED education to the public with the ultimate goal of establishing a national CPR and AED education day in the United States that will always be free and accessible to all.
Fantastic. So needed. Was there an event that inspired this work?
So the foundation's initial idea came out of the work of my husband, Dr. Jack Perkins, who is an emergency medicine physician in Carilion. Mm-hmm. And his concern was, as an emergency medicine physician, out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is one of the few medical emergencies that by the time the patient actually gets to the emergency department, the outcome is largely decided.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's decided is that the public is really the first link in the chain of survival for someone who suffers an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So if you have folks in the public who are able to provide high-quality CPR and utilize an AED, that person will have a much better chance of survival when they get to the emergency department versus having someone in the public who only calls 911 and CPR is not started until EMS arrives on the scene.
Yeah. I'm reminded, I've gotten into pickleball over the last year or so. And not a terribly active sport, but, you can, I guess, raise your blood pressure a little bit, raise your heart rate a little bit.
Absolutely.
And it was, I think in May, I'm out there. It's on a random Wednesday night. There we are. We just started playing. And all of a sudden behind us, We hear a little bit of a commotion. We turn around, and the pickleball court right behind us, 53-year-old man was out.
Wow.
Out. Thankfully, one of the teammates that he was playing with was a physical therapist who was CPR trained. Well, so he immediately starts doing compressions. But it was another 5 to 10 minutes before the Salem Fire and Rescue arrived, and they were able to then take over. And they had the machine that was compressing the chest.
Yes.
I'd never seen that in action before. But even so, they're saying we're not getting any pulse, and they're injecting them with all sorts of stuff, and they're shocking him at that point. And it felt like an eternity, but it was probably 15 minutes or so after the initial incident that suddenly it's like, we got a pulse.
Excellent.
And they carted him away, and a week or so later we learned he's out of the hospital, had a stent put in, and he's back among the living. But he was dead. I mean, dead.
Yes.
For many minutes, and were it not for the compression that the physical therapist had done, and then followed by the quick response by the EMS with the shock, he would have remained dead.
I agree with you 100%. I think that is a case where the physical therapist, in fact, did save his life.
Yeah.
EMS is invaluable, but all the EMS folks will tell you that response times, even in the best of situations, are 6 to 8 minutes.
Right.
So every minute that goes by without somebody performing CPR or using a defibrillator when it's available, the chance of survival goes down by 10%. Mm-hmm. So if EMS actually arrived there at the 9th minute, the person would only have a 10% chance of survival if no one had performed CPR.
Yeah.
But that physical therapist obviously kept things moving and kept circulating the blood that provided the needed oxygen to this patient's brain while they were awaiting EMS. Some of the reasons why we really feel getting these skills into the hands of the public are things that you already commented on, in the sense that if someone goes down, they're dead.
Yeah.
You can't make anybody more dead. So we want to take away the barriers that the public have. We want to take away the fear that they're going to hurt someone. Mm-hmm. You cannot hurt someone by performing CPR. You cannot hurt somebody by using an AED. The machines are smarter than we are. They will only shock someone that needs a shock. You cannot put an AED on someone and accidentally press a button and hurt them if they do not need a shock. The machine will not react to that press of the button. It will not shock someone who does not need to be a shock to receive a shock. So we really want the public to understand that it is something that they need to act on when they see someone have an out of hospital cardiac arrest. They cannot possibly harm that person. All they can potentially do is save a life, and we want to give them the tools to save a life.
Well, I mean, that's such a great point, because even my little incident, that was the first time I'd ever seen someone actually drop dead of a heart attack, and the physical therapist, who was CPR trained, had never actually performed CPR until that moment. And, he's, pushing, away. But when the EMS guys actually arrived, his compressions and their compressions were far different experiences. I mean, I'm sure that there were all sorts of, bones kind of,
yes,
breaking when the EMS guys started doing it, because, I mean, suddenly, that abdomen was just really inflating when they were doing it. And I think because you're fearful of hurting somebody, but you got to get over that in order to save somebody's life.
Absolutely. One of the quality marks of high quality CPR is actually usually some broken ribs.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, most of us would rather have a couple broken ribs than be dead.
Yeah.
And you raise a good point with the training that EMS has had and the physical therapist has had. Those are very valuable training classes that are offered for folks who work professionally. Our goal is actually to take away any sort of barrier to the public. Mm-hmm. So with our training classes, we teach people everything they need to know in about an hour. So there's no pre-test, there's no post-test. We do give a certificate of completion, but we're not the American Heart Association. We don't charge any learners. So we basically go over 20 to 30 minutes of didactic information, telling folks how to appropriately perform CPR and how to utilize a defibrillator, and also break down any barriers. Am I scared of hurting somebody? I'm scared that I might get sued, all of which are actually false. There's a Good Samaritan law in every state that protects folks from a lawsuit if they would actually attempt to save someone's life. And then we go and do small groups so they can actually do hands-on practice with mannequins and AED trainers. And our mannequins will actually give feedback on if they're pressing fast enough or deep enough, so they can really understand the amount of force that is required to provide adequate CPR.
So Compress and Shock Foundation provides both the compress and the shock.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So talk about how the program works.
So since our inception in 2017, what we've been doing is we've been doing 1 and now 2 large training days a year where we invite anyone in the public ages 13 and up to come out and train with us.
13?
Yes.
Okay.
There's actually great evidence out there that children as young as 11 and 12 have been able to successfully utilize an AED. We picked the age 13 because we have to set a cutoff somewhere, and 6 and 7-year-olds can't do adequate CPR, but anyone ages 13 and up is welcome to attend one of our classes. They are completely free, and we do our registration online. And in about an hour, you learn how to perform CPR and also how to utilize the defibrillator. And we actually have both AED trainers and mannequins for folks to practice on at the classes. So our next event on Sunday, October 16th, we're doing roughly about 25 classes in the Roanoke area. And then we're also doing classes in Maryland, in North Carolina, and also in Georgia, as well as we're continuing to try to expand our educational offerings.
Wow. Once again, I'm joined here on Buzz for Good by Dr. Karen Perkins, who is the Vice Director of the Compress and Shock Foundation, which is seeking to provide people in all walks of life in various public situations with the skills and the tools that they need to resuscitate someone who has had a cardiac event through compression and shock. So talk about the AED machines. That seems like a pretty critical piece of all this, and what you are able to do to provide these in a public setting.
Yeah. So you are absolutely right. So CPR is the bridge to defibrillation. So the defibrillators are going to shock what is called a shockable rhythm. So that is when someone is in ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation, which is a very common rhythm that you will see when someone suffers an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So the goal is for CPR to prime the heart and to circulate blood so that the brain stays alive and active while hopefully someone is getting a defibrillator and placing it on the patient to deliver a shock. The machine will analyze what their heart rhythm is doing, and then if appropriate, it'll prompt you to shock the patient. So studies have shown that if you can get a defibrillator on someone within 3 minutes of their out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, their chance of survival is as high as 70%,
Wow.
which is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
What our organization has been doing is a couple things. We've been working with various partners so that anyone who attends one of our trainings is eligible to purchase an AED for their own personal use, car, business, home, at about 35% off retail. We get no profits and no kickbacks from this. It's just a great way to get more AEDs into the community. We've also been working with other organizations to place AEDs in places such as Fallon Park and Washington Park. So that was through our organization, where AEDs are in enclosures there now. So if someone suffers a cardiac arrest, what happens is they go by the box, they call 911, and the 911 operator gives them the access code to open the box.
Okay.
So it's in an all-weather enclosure. And that's something that they can go ahead and access in the event of a cardiac arrest. And then finally, for this specific event on October 16th, we've actually received grant funding from both Carilion Clinic and Raleigh Court Presbyterian Church so that our host sites are incentivized to enroll 35 or more learners per class. And with that enrollment, we are actually giving them an AED. So we are trying to put AEDs into areas that really need them for access. For example, Pig River Community Center is one of our host sites. We have they're in Rocky Mount. We have multiple host sites in Roanoke as well. Some of the churches are getting their first AED through this program. This is part of a pilot program so that we can hopefully attract as many learners as possible through greater community engagement, where folks realize, hey, if I come, I will not only learn something that can help me save someone's life, I will also help my church, community center, organization obtain an AED that's needed.
Lovely. And so this is happening October 16th.
October 16th, correct.
And for someone to find out more information about how to register for this and be part of this, where would they go?
Yep. So very easy. Go to our website, www.compressandshock.org. There is the homepage pops up there. You can register online. The classes are completely free, open to anyone ages 13 and up, and they last approximately an hour, and you will learn both CPR and how to use a defibrillator.
Lovely. All right. So compress and shock, that's COMPRESS, and spelled out A-N-D?
Yep.
And shock.
.org. You got it.
Okay. So once again, joined here on Buzz for Good by Dr. Karen Perkins, the Vice Director of the Compress and Shock Foundation, a fairly new nonprofit that's trying to spread the word nationwide about how to properly resuscitate someone who's had a cardiac event, as well as provide them with free or very low-cost AED machines.
Correct.
So that they have that technology available to do that before EMS can arrive, or they can get to a hospital. The compression, that can keep someone's blood flowing, but it's not going to actually get somebody's heart beating again, whereas the AED piece of it is what's going to actually shock someone's heart back into the rhythm. Is that
so
roughly correct?
Roughly correct, yes. There are times that sometimes the chest compressions themselves may be able to get somebody back into a normal cardiac rhythm, but usually if they're in something called ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation, it's really the AED that's going to provide the life-saving shock that they need.
Okay.
One of the big take-home pieces that it's important for people to realize is that mouth-to-mouth resuscitation is no longer part of the algorithm for out-of-hospital cardiac arrest for adult victims.
Okay.
It's a little different for kids, but this was one of the barriers that we talk about because in the past, people did not really want to put their mouth on a stranger.
Right.
So sometimes they thought, well, if I can't do mouth-to-mouth, I'm not going to do anything, which is absolutely incorrect. And really, CPR is going to be life-saving, even if you don't have access to an AED. If you can provide high-quality compressions until EMS gets there with an AED, you can certainly save a life. Our youngest cardiac arrest survivor is actually a gentleman who arrested at the age of 16 at a small Christian school in Rocky Mount. They did not have an AED at that time. Since the time, our organization has provided them with an AED, but he received high-quality CPR for greater than 20 minutes from a physician assistant and another individual who were watching the basketball game, and he is completely neurologically intact, and actually he's going to be married in November. He's now in his 20s. So it can just show you how high-quality CPR can truly provide the bridge until EMS got there, and they actually defibrillated him and brought him back into rhythm.
Wow. Well, that was my next question. What are some of the success stories that you have witnessed so far through the Compress and Shock Foundation?
Yeah, so we are constantly finding more and more people that have reached out to us saying, hey, I had an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and this is kind of what happened, and this is how I got saved. So one of our other cardiac arrest survivors, her name's Twyla. She actually had a cardiac arrest in her house. She was having a little shoulder pain, and her husband, David, had previously been trained years ago in CPR, and he performed CPR for her while they called EMS. And EMS clearly said that without his intervention, because they live in Botetourt, it took a little bit to get to them. She probably would not have made it, but because he performed high-quality CPR, he was able to save her life. So really, there's a lot of stories out there. Unfortunately, there was also some stories out there about folks who did not make it.
Sure.
We have a family that's been very involved in our organization who unfortunately lost a daughter roughly about 15 years ago when she was out on a run, and she suffered an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, and there were people around her, but no one performed CPR, and by the time EMS had got there, more than 10 minutes had passed, and unfortunately, she ended up not being able to recover from that. So our goal is to decrease the number of stories like that and increase the success stories. And that's part of the reason why we really want these skills into as many people's hands as possible, as well as AEDs in the community, because those are really going to be life-saving devices. So the more access people have, and also the feeling that people have like, yes, I can do this. I can take this machine off the wall. I will not hurt somebody. I can help somebody. We really want to empower the public to be able to do that.
Well, you know, the two cases you've cited so far, you have a 16-year-old boy playing basketball, and then you have a young woman, it sounds like, who was out on the run. You know, I think so often we think of people who are having some kind of cardiac event as being middle-aged or older.
Correct.
Not a healthy lifestyle. Who, you know, and I'd like to, in a second, talk about, you know, what are some things while I've got you here on this conversation, you know, what are some things that people can do to minimize their risk of a cardiac event. But really, though, this is something that could strike anybody at any time.
Absolutely. And you hit on such a key point there, Michael, that sudden cardiac arrest can happen to anyone at any time. One of the misconceptions that we break down is the difference between a heart attack or a myocardial infarction and a sudden cardiac arrest. So if you think of a heart attack is more like a plumbing issue in the heart. So you get a blockage in one of the arteries. People sometimes will have some chest pain, some discomfort. They get sweaty because not enough blood is flowing through that artery. But a lot of times they're still talking to you and they're able to say, hey, something's wrong, my heart is hurting me. Right. Now, certainly a heart attack can lead to a cardiac arrest if they have a massive heart attack and they have enough damage that happens immediately. But cardiac arrest can happen from multiple reasons. If you think of a cardiac arrest, it's more of an electrical problem, not so much of a plumbing problem.
Okay.
So that's why you're going to have instances where not only will you have people who have had massive heart attacks who then have a cardiac arrest, but you'll have folks like these young people who for some reason have some sort of arrhythmia. A lot of times it's not even really known what actually caused this arrhythmogenic event that caused their heart to stop. But they do get investigated, and both of our young survivor who was 16, he now has a defibrillator in place, so he has his own implantable defibrillator, but they were never able to pinpoint exactly why his heart stopped.
Wow.
So it can happen from various reasons. Sometimes with kids, certainly it can be a respiratory cause, primarily drownings, those sorts of things. But a heart attack and a sudden cardiac arrest are not the same type of events.
Okay.
So what we teach somebody is that it can happen to anyone at any time. And we tell folks, if you see someone down, you don't have to worry about feeling for a pulse, any of those things that are very stressful in those situations. Ask yourself, is this person breathing normally? And if your answer is anything but yes, they're absolutely breathing normally, you need to start CPR. Because the worst thing that could happen is they wake up and they slap you off of them.
Right.
If you started CPR and they didn't really need it. But there are cases in the past, for example, Hank Gathers, who was a famous basketball player. If you look at video of his sudden cardiac arrest, unfortunately the doctors had a defibrillator next to them and they never used it because they thought he was seizing. Because in his mind, he's a young, healthy athlete.
Yeah.
He could never possibly have something wrong with his heart.
Yeah.
So he was actually having a sudden cardiac arrest and it was unrecognized, and that's the reason why he passed away. Now, granted, this was decades ago, so hopefully we have come forward since that time as far as recognition. But if you look at outcomes, the outcomes really haven't changed a whole lot, even from 20 years ago when you have out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. So that's why we really need the public to be the one that pushes us towards a better outcome.
Well, and I wanted to mention that it could happen to anyone at any time, because I think sometimes someone who maybe has an unhealthy lifestyle, who has a heart attack, is like, well, they kind of had it coming to them,
right?
Which is that's not the right attitude either. But if you kind of get the idea out there that really, this can happen to a young child, a teenager who's out on the run, anybody. And this is why we all, as the public, need to be better equipped to handle those situations, because they are life and death, and oftentimes that life and death is in our hands.
Absolutely. It really is one of those things that what the public does or doesn't do can mean the difference between life and death for your family member, your neighbor, your friend. And certainly, as you mentioned, talking about decreasing your individual chance of things such as a heart attack. Of course, we definitely advocate healthy lifestyle, good diet, exercise, those sorts of things. But really what the evidence shows is that this can happen to anyone at any time, even with the best intentions, living the healthiest life.
Yeah. Once again, joined here on Buzz for Good by Dr. Karen Perkins, who's the Vice Director of the Compress and Shock Foundation, and more on them at compressandshock.org. They're having a big event on October the 16th where you can go to their website and register for one of the many events that they have, where you can learn about CPR as well as learn how to use one of their defibrillators. And then if your location gets at least 35 participants, then you will actually receive a free AED device.
So
correct?
The location that is hosting receives the free AED device.
Correct.
Unfortunately, we do not have enough to provide every learner an AED device, but they will be helping the location get an AED device for their community. So we've picked communities that need these devices.
Okay.
The trainings are open to everyone for free, ages 13 and up. And for folks who come individually for training, if they would like to purchase an AED for their own personal use, their car, their home, their business, we do have a partnership where they can get an AED for about 35% off retail value.
How many AED devices have you been able to distribute so far?
So about 60 so far since our inception in 2017. We've trained about 4,000 people with no cost to them, and then we placed about 60 AEDs into the community.
Fabulous. And the community being what region?
So largely Southwest Virginia, Roanoke, Danville, Martinsville area, Rocky Mount. We do have a footprint as well in North Carolina, Wisconsin, Maryland, also Georgia. We're continuing to expand. A lot of times that is where we have other physician champions. So we now have state chapters in Maryland, state chapter in North Carolina, state chapter in Wisconsin as well. And our hope is to continue to grow these chapters.
That is outstanding. What are the next events after October 16th?
Sure. So after October 16th, our next large event is going to be the first Saturday in June. We are coupling that with sudden cardiac arrest week. So we kind of use the awareness that's being promoted throughout the country. And then again, we're going to continue to offer these trainings and hopefully as well continue to have grant funding to support placing more AEDs into the community. We are trying to move towards one national CPR and AED education day. And honestly, our instructors are all volunteer. So mobilizing them twice a year is kind of a big ask. We usually mobilize 100 to 200 instructors to help train. So that's why we're doing it kind of two opportunities through the year for the general public.
Okay. For this October 16th event, you mentioned that Carilion Clinic and was it Raleigh?
Raleigh Court Presbyterian Church, correct.
Okay. They're providing the funds
are providing grant funding
AED
for these AED machines.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. So definitely very appreciative of their support for the efforts to get these AEDs into the community.
Yeah. Your co-title, if you will, is the Director of Fundraising as well. So I assume that you're always looking for other funding opportunities to be able to pay for more AED devices to get into the community.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely rely to a heavy extent on grant funding to pay for our AEDs that we distribute to the community, also to pay for our training equipment, our mannequins and AED trainers. So along those lines, we are always looking for businesses that are willing to partner with us. We have site sponsorships that are still available for October 16th date. So if any businesses are interested in partnering with us, you get recognition on social media. We do a sign for you at the site stating that you are the site sponsor for the educational event at that site, and lots of shout outs on Facebook and Instagram and our social media channels, and that will help defray some of the cost of our training equipment as well as advertising for the event.
Okay. How much does it cost? What is your cost typically to get this equipment? So
AED trainers and mannequins, and they can be used for approximately 10 years. But if you're going to get a pack of like 5 AED trainers, I think it's like 4 AED trainers and 5 AED mannequins, you're looking probably at about $800.
Okay.
So we have over the years, through our grants and purchases, acquired a fair bit of equipment. We also have been blessed with fire and EMS also bringing equipment as well.
Nice.
But that is definitely helpful to us to have additional funding as our training reach has expanded.
Right. But as you're providing a free AED machine to these communities that are having that, what is the value of that?
Gotcha.
And if someone wanted to say, well, I'd love to be able to support your work and be able to purchase an AED machine, how much would that?
Sure. So we are getting it through our partner at Rescue One basically at their cost, which is $550.
Okay.
So,
okay. So if someone wanted to come to you and say, hey, I believe in your work, I'd like to support it, a donation of, you'll accept any donation.
We will accept any donation.
But a donation of $550 would go towards purchasing a new AED device to then provide to someone else in the community.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. That's wonderful. Again, more information about Compress and Shock Foundation at compressandshock.org. Big event coming up on October the 16th, where businesses and other community centers are going to be hosting the Compress and Shock events where people can come and learn more about how to do CPR as well as how to use the AED machines. AED stands for what?
Automated external defibrillator.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. How easy are they to use?
They're really easy. Obviously a 3-year-old cannot use them, but there was actually a news story that we show at one of our trainings of a 11-year-old girl who's pulling an AED off the wall and using it. So I think and this is a girl who learned her skills at fire camp, so it was good that certainly someone told her what to do, but it will prompt you exactly what to do. As soon as you open up the machine, it will tell you to remove the patient's clothes. It'll tell you to begin CPR. There are pictures on the pad which shows you how to place the pad on the chest, and the machines will prompt you to say, it says, place the pads on the patient's bare chest as shown. So they really walk you through everything.
Sure.
And our AED trainers, which are not live machines, but basically replicate the AEDs that we have folks practice with during our training, do the same thing. They prompt the patient. They prompt you to undress the patient. They prompt you to provide CPR while someone's placing the AED pads on the chest. They prompt you when to stop the CPR so the machine can analyze the victim's true heart rhythm. They prompt you when to give a shock. So it really walks you through everything.
I imagine they're probably easy to follow instructions, but at the same time, the person who is doing this is extremely stressed and maybe is not able to process information as well as they could otherwise. And so actually participating in one of these trainings that you provide helps with that process.
Absolutely. And we encourage folks to attend our trainings on a regular basis every year to 2 years, because thankfully most of us are not performing these skills in our daily life.
Yeah.
So just to have a refresher and understand, like, hey, if I am faced with this emergency, this is what I need to do. It's only an hour of your time. When you think about all the time we commit to other things, an hour of your time where you can actually learn how to save one of your fellow citizens' life, I think it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, fellow citizens, family members, friends, etc. Right. Well, Dr. Perkins, thank you so much again for all of your work and with the Compress and Shock Foundation. I hope we get a great response on October the 16th. And for more information, once again, go to compressandshock.org. Thanks so much for coming to Buzz for Good.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you having me.